Start in 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, this is Preston Zeller. I'm here with Jacy here today, and we're going to be discussing how Jacy went from this state of really understanding grieving as being consumed by kind of negative practices to embracing healthy aspects of grieving in really just only 30 days. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So Jacy, welcome. To get this kicked off, why don't we delve a little bit into who you are and just, we'll share a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Hi. Thanks for having me. What do you want me to say about myself?
I mean, just a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, upper left, very far, very close to the Puget Sound, just immersed in family. I grew up in a really big family on my dad's side. And through that, I've experienced a lot of closeness with people. And then, through having a large family, I've experienced a lot of loss, unfortunately, from a young age, which is, part of what ties me into this. But, I grew up I was there for about 20 years. And then I moved out to the Vancouver, Portland area, got my job in tech. That's how I met you. Mm-hmm. And I really just came out here and tried to thrive and create relationships and, just really live my best life. So I guess that's a little about where I came from, at least.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that. And I know, when we were working together in tech stuff too, you'd kind of started discovering my painting. But I mean, and we were talking about this a little bit before, what appealed to you about the kind of painting that I was doing?
Well, it was something that, we got to know each other a little bit. And then you were just really open with the fact that you were going through this grieving process and that your art was starting to turn towards this direction of being a coping mechanism for you and a healthy way for you to put that energy and that thought and all of what you were holding into something tangible and being able to share that vulnerability with people, and having it be so beautiful. And like you mentioned at the beginning, how we were discussing that it traditionally grief comes with all of this negative stuff and all of these negative things that you can be doing to deal with it. And everyone around you, in a sense, will enable that because they can see that you're hurting. Mm-hmm. And so then seeing you putting all of this, I don't even want to call it negative energy, but this heavy stuff into a positive way to share that with people. I was just really interested in that and really supportive of that because, I haven't seen enough of that. And it was such a kind of a new concept. Like there may be a lot of artists that are doing what you're doing, but they don't label it as such because they don't feel like comfortable being that vulnerable, So that was something that really struck me, and resonated with me.
Cool. I mean, did you have, a sort of interest in art before that? I mean, you have a lot of tattoos, I know. So, I mean, you're definitely attracted to the, hand artistry.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing, just growing up, I really loved art. I would tell my teachers I wanted to be an artist, right? Mm-hmm. For, part of my young life. And, unfortunately teachers are usually like, oh, well, that won't make you much money, or they'll say something corny like that. Right. Which is like not cool because kids, you don't necessarily want to inflate your kid's ego and say, you will be a rocket scientist or something like that. Mm-hmm. But if a kid says they want to be an artist, like, just shut up, just let them do what they want to do. So I've always loved it. And I've always felt like it was a really great way to hyper focus on something and feel like the word productive, I kind of love and hate, but feeling like, you have this thing that you put energy into and it culminates to the finishing product that you're really proud of. So I've always been interested in it. And then of course, as I got older and I realized I could actually put it on my body, I was like, whoa, and for me, tattoos is partially an expression of my grief or emotions, when I have really strong emotions, tattoos are a way, between the physical pain of it and then also the representation of what the artwork is. That's always been really like I don't even know what the word would be, it almost like a transcendence or something. Like it's something that's really like sacred to me. And so the marriage between the physical and emotional aspect of getting tattooed or making art, I really can understand that on a deeper level. But it took me a little while. I had to be more of an adult to like really realize how all these things were so interconnected. At first you're like, oh, tattoos are cool, but then you get older, you're like, whoa, there was so much going on there.
Right. Yeah. Certainly. And I think this kind of dovetails into, when we talk about grief, right, and the different ways people can deal with grieving. There is a certain amount of grieving practices that we can assume that they're toxic, right? And culturally, that's a lot of what's out there as well. But, I think in a sort of opposite effect, art, tattoo art is being ingrained into your body. And then the outward expression of creativity can be that backwards effect, right? Where you're transferring, your pain or whatever onto canvas.
Right.
But tell me about your experience with grief and how the art has kind of changed that perspective of, what grief can look like.
Yeah. So starting pretty young, like I said, I've lost quite a few family members, but one that hit really hard, I was around the 8th grade and my mother had a twin brother and he died of cancer. And she kind of went off the deep end, or she really did. And pretty much everyone in the family was like, I'm done with your crap. Like, I can't deal with how, I don't even crazy or whatever the words, whatever is going on. Like, we understand that you're upset, but you're losing it, which kind of rightfully so. But I was kind of one of the only ones in the family who could sit there and hold space for her, and just kind of understand a little bit deeper of what she was going through. Cause I'm just an empathetic person. And I just knew how much that she cared for him. But it was, low key traumatizing because looking back, she didn't have a lot of coping mechanisms. She was an alcoholic. It was a tough spot to be in as a younger kid and helping your mom through grief when you don't know much about it yourself. And so moving on, getting a little bit older, and then, around the time that I had met you and been introduced to the concept of your art and what you're doing, my husband's mom was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And so it was kind of this fear, this tidal wave of fear rose up inside of me because what I've seen before, the way that people deal with grief, or my example of how someone dealt with grief, like my mother, was substance abuse and, pushing people away and all of this stuff that's just, really sucks and really hurts people on a deep level. And so I was immediately afraid. And then I did, looking at your art and having an original piece of your artwork hanging on my wall. And it was just this representation of, wait, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, there's different ways that people can go when they're grieving. They can take that and put that energy into something that's powerful, like art, that's, it's moving and it's not hurting anyone and it's letting you process. And you're sharing in a really raw way and it's not numbing your emotions. And so, that really resonated with me as well. It's just being able to see how it could be other alternatives that aren't as much talked about or that I wasn't familiar with myself.
Yeah, no, thanks for explaining that. That's really cool. I'm just kind of curious on that note. Like, why do you think these, there aren't more alternatives kind of talked about, or they aren't understood as much?
Why they're not?
Yeah.
Well, they talk about the stages of grief, and I think, obviously denial is one of the big ones. And I really think a lot of people in certain aspects, like obviously, yeah, they have to accept that the person's not here, they're not coming back. But I think some people really don't get past the denial of their own emotions about it. Like they stick in the denial phase. And because of that, there are things out there that can numb your feelings, so why you don't have to like look at them if they're not in your face, you can push them down, push them down, push them down. But they talk about, like in therapy, even just dealing with different traumas in your childhood or throughout your life, if you don't face the feelings that you're having, they'll eat you alive. And so, yeah, so I think that it's just people don't want to talk about it, or they just don't want to acknowledge that it's there. And for whatever other reasons, they don't want to be vulnerable. Or maybe the person that passed away was the person they felt safe being vulnerable with. I mean, there's so much there. And so those are, just a few examples of what I think might be going on, and why that's hard for people to face that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that aspect of it. That's kind of more on the meta level of, grieving and whatnot. But, what areas of, your life do you think have improved by having that different understanding of like what's possible in grief?
It really, like I had mentioned, there's that fear there for me personally of how things could go in that process for someone like my husband, or, whomever else that's close to me that would be hurting. And realizing that, not only is this an option, but I can display that in my home. We can have this, like your art, we have this on the wall. It's actually right up there. We have that there, and it's like, hey, this is, the thought behind it is this is working through your grief, and being able to suggest healthy options and know that they're there is like, even that is just like a huge relief in a way, to be able to be like, hey, here's, there's all these different sides of how this could go, but here right in front of us, we have this example of how, you can really take that and process that and make it beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds like in some ways too, you're not sort of dreading this, supposed inevitability of being trapped to something that is gonna hurt you in this way of dealing with the grief.
Right. It opens up the gates of like, okay, it doesn't have to be just this one way. Like there's a spectrum of ways to deal with grief, and it starts the conversation, if anything, because like before I had met you, I don't know hundreds of millions of artists or anything like that, but I've never met one that had a project like yours, or that just outright was sharing what the project was about and why they were doing it, and had such a deep message behind it. I think a lot of people, really good art comes from pain, like unfortunately, but also it's a fact, like really good, deep art comes from deep emotions. So whether that's love or pain or grief or all of those combined, that's just something, your openness was really awesome. And probably a huge reason why I was immediately on board was like, not only were you doing this because you love it and because this is, what you do and what you wanted to do, but how your message came across. And, obviously it's beautiful art too. So that's always positive. Right. But that's another thing too. Art, I think it's not good or bad. Art's not good or bad. It's about you and how you express yourself, and whether or not you felt like you got what you needed to out on paper or canvas. It's not about whether or not you're good. I don't believe that either.
Yeah, it's easy to get preoccupied too with what especially with what negative people think about certain styles of art. But yeah, you're right. It's very much, it's subjective. It's in the eye of the beholder. And But that's what's so cool when someone connects with a piece of art, and or you're, working together on a commission, you can translate all those needs and wants and desires into something that they're like, wow, I didn't have a literal hand on this, but I did have a hand in this. And that's really special.
Yeah.
Who do you think I'm a good fit for in working with different types of people?
I think, it's funny. Like for me, like I know a lot of people who will go out and they'll get like a memorial tattoo or something like that. And sometimes they'll even put the ashes into the tattoo. I know other people, that might not be like something that they can fully commit to, or for whatever reason, they don't want a tattoo, or, but it's like, and this might sound cheesy, but that grief is like tattooed onto your heart. You know what I mean? Like regardless of whether or not someone can see that on the outside, but a way for someone who's wanting something tangible that they can potentially keep forever, God forbid anything happens to the painting, but something that's tangible that they want as a reminder of those feelings and of that person, and someone to hear them and work through that with them and really hold their story close to their heart and make something, based off of that connection. So like, it's really someone who wants help working through all of those feelings of grief and knowing that there's going to be this positive product at the end of that road. And knowing someone like you who has experienced these same emotions, and just, having that human connection, having that understanding between you, and then coming out of it with this beautiful artwork that you can then display or just keep close to your heart.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I mean, what is your number one piece of advice for someone who is, in grief and they're looking for some way to commemorate their loved one?
I think it's obviously it's really up to the person in a lot of ways, but keeping your mind open to the different ways that healing can manifest, whether that's if it's a poem, or like I said, a tattoo or a painting, or, a ceremonial thing that you want to do with spreading their ashes, or, just anything that you can think of that is going to feel like you've given yourself some closure, and like you have remembered them in some, memorable, meaningful way is the right way. Right. Because there is no right or wrong with grief. I like to believe it's more of just a process in general. And so, does that make sense? Am I rambling?
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's a deep question. So
it is. Yeah.
And we didn't rehearse that or anything. So, that's all good. That was a sincere response. So
yes, that's what we're going for.
Yeah. Where can people find out about you online, Jacy?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I mostly am very active on LinkedIn. As far as, it started out as just like work networking, but now I've kind of taken it further, and I just really want to connect with people, and be there for them in ways like if they need an encouraging word or anything like that. So definitely LinkedIn, and I don't really use Facebook anymore because it's not really my thing. And then I have Instagram as well, is where I share more of like my personality,
Okay.
like LinkedIn's a little bit more professional, and I keep it light, you know what I mean? But Instagram is more of getting to know me, or knowing more about my life and what I think is funny and things like that.
What's your Instagram handle?
It is jacy.luna.xoxo.
Okay, cool. Good. Well, I really appreciate you just taking the time to talk with me today. And really
Yeah,
enjoyed
hopefully got something good
learning.
out of it.
Yeah, learning more of your insights. So, yeah, we'll just appreciate everyone for listening too, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording.
Cool.